Well, welcome back, everybody, and today we're going to continue on with motivating behavior by looking at some more models that are kind of similar to who we saw yesterday, Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Today we're going to take a look at what motivates people as far as the goals, or their ability to reach those goals, and if they place value on those goals. We're also going to take a look at the concept of equity, and that's a very important concept to understand, especially in this day where diversity and discrimination and all of these issues are coming up in the workplace. So let's go ahead and begin as we take a look in more detail motivating behavior. Okay, today we're going to continue on with motivating behavior as we look at a few more models of motivation. Now, from a needs-based perspective, there is what we call ERG theory, and this was a model that was posited by Alderfer, and really what it does is break down Maslow's five-layer hierarchy of needs into three. And you see these. You have existence, relatedness, and growth. Existence would be similar to survival. Relatedness would be similar to belongingness. And then growth, of course, would be the esteem needs. Now, apart from Maslow, Alderfer makes several assumptions. First of all, you can work on one need and more than one need at a time. And that's what brings about motivation as well. If you remember, Maslow said that you had to work on one, and only until you satisfied that current layer could you go up higher. And also, Alderfer believed that satisfaction progression and frustration regression components imply that a person may not stay at the same level of need in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In other words, Maslow believed that you could move up, Alderfer believed that you can move up and you can move down that hierarchy. So that's different. Maslow only believed that you could move up and you couldn't regress, whereas Alderfer believed that you could. Now, another popular model is Hertzberg's two-factor theory. And here, Hertzberg believed that you had motivating factors and you had hygiene factors that could influence motivation. Hygiene factors are those things that have to be present for you to even stay. For instance, you have to be paid enough to survive. You have to have a safe working place. Now, if those needs aren't met, then nothing else is going to matter. But now you may have enough pay to survive, and you may have a safe working environment, but that doesn't mean you're going to be motivated. So you have two realms here. You have two ends of a spectrum that you as the employer or manager are going to have to contend with. The ones that have to be maintained or they won't show up for work, and those that have to be maintained to increase motivation. Now, Hertzberg assumes motivation occurs through job enrichment once hygiene factors are addressed. So, kind of like Maslow, the hygiene factors have to be in place first before you can move on to motivating factors. And then there are criticisms. May be both method and culture bound. That means it may be specific to that environment or to that culture. Also, it fails to account for individual differences. Some people don't care what the environment is like as long as they get paid. And some, no matter if they get paid or have everything in place to motivate them, they won't be motivated. And the factors, and we just talked about that, pay, for instance, may affect both dimensions. So you can have both of pay, like I said, and it may be a hygiene factor. Pay may be well, and you're paying your people well, but they're still not motivated. So here you have to take into account the individual psychology of the person, of the worker. Now, figure 5.3 is just a model that shows you the traditional view which is you're either satisfied or dissatisfied. According to Hertzberg, you have satisfaction and no satisfaction, and these are the motivating factors. And then you have dissatisfaction at the bottom and no dissatisfaction, and those are the hygiene factors. Now, McClellan believed there were 3 needs that people have. First of all, there's the need for achievement, and this is what motivates people to climb the ladder, to take on more responsibility, to accomplish a task more effectively than they have done in the past. There's a need for affiliation, which is the belongingness need. And then there's the need for power, which is to accumulate authority. And that's the desire to control the resources in one's environment. So you see that people still have that efficacy need. They have that belongingness need. Controlling the resources is another need that really would go with self-efficacy or belongingness or self-esteem. And then we have here, went too far, focus of process-based perspectives. It's why people choose certain behavioral options to satisfy their needs and how people evaluate their satisfaction after they have attained these goals. So once the goals are met, and these models imply that we are people who set out to achieve goals. In fact, there's a model for that. There's a theory called goal theory, and people exist to create or establish and achieve goals. So once those goals have been attained, you evaluate your satisfaction, and then that should motivate you for bigger or better things. Now, equity theory, let me see, I don't want to go too far. There we go. Equity theory, to me, is one of the most important theories to understand, especially when it comes to workplace morale and motivation. Now, equity theory focuses on the desire to be treated with equity and to avoid perceived inequity. Equity is a perceptual belief that one is being treated fairly in relation to others. Inequity is the opposite. It is a perceptual belief that one is being treated unfairly in relation to others. So here's how that pans out as far as a formula. If you see here in the bottom, the outcomes of the self as compared to the inputs of the self. So my outputs, my work compared to my inputs, which is pay, my outcomes, which is the pay, compared to what I'm putting into the organization, compared with the outcomes, which would be pay, rewards, recognition, over the inputs of what they're putting in, I'm making those comparisons. Now, if I believe my input is greater than my outcome compared to the other person, then I'm going to be less motivated. In fact, it's going to decrease my morale. In other words, if I have a person who I believe is equal to me in, let's say, job title, all of those things being equal, you're doing the same job, and you feel that the person is equal to you in every respect. If that person is making more money than you and you're doing the same job, then that can lead to inequity. And this is where people start to have breakdowns in their work, their motivation, their morale, and so forth. And this is one reason why you don't discuss salaries in the workplace, because of this very concern or issue. Now, there's a very important word I want you to look here. It's the perceptual belief. Whether there is actual inequity or not makes no difference. All that matters is what the person believes. For instance, that scenario that I just gave you, myself and another person, we're doing the same job, we have the same title, everything should be equal, but I find out that she's making more than I am. Well, it may not come into the mix that this lady may have more experience than me from another company. She may have a degree. She may have other skills that are necessary for the company. You see, we don't consider a lot of times other variables that can cause inequity. All we're worried about is what we perceive to be, and if we perceive it, that becomes our reality. And it's very hard to manage that once the cat's out of the bag. Because I'm going to go talk to my fellow workers. Hey, you know, she's making more than we are. And what's that going to do to them? It's going to demotivate them. So you have to be aware that equity theory pretty much indicates that everybody is watching everybody else, and they want to make sure that what they are getting is the same as everybody else. And whether there is real equity or not, it's what they perceive to be that's going to determine how they behave in the workplace. So transparency is very important here. And this is the figure 5.4 just talks about inequity and equity and how you make those comparisons. Now, Victor Vroom had another model that I think is also important, that's very practical in the workplace and in real life. And Victor Vroom had an idea that you're not going to do anything unless you evaluate what you're going to be doing, if you're going to be able to do it or not, and the payoff that you'll receive for doing it. And really, when you think about it, that's really what we do in all aspects of our life. Vroom believed that motivation depends on how much we want something and how likely we think we are to get it. That's it in a nutshell. And the key components, as you see here, are the effort to performance expectancy. That means the perceived probability that effort will lead to performance. That means that I believe I am capable and my effort will lead to the outcome that is in question. Performance to outcome expectancy, and that's the perceived probability that performance will lead to certain outcomes. First of all, I need to know that I can do whatever, and that if I do whatever, it's going to produce the outcomes that I expect. The outcome, that's anything that results from performing a behavior. And then valence, that's the degree of attractiveness or unattractiveness that a particular outcome has for a person. It's the value that you place on that outcome. So let's take a look at you. You're here getting a degree. Well, obviously, you believe that your effort will lead to the steps and that you have the ability to engage in the criteria for getting a degree. And then you have the probability or the idea that your performance, you passing all of the tests, will lead to that degree. And then anything that results from performing a behavior, you want that outcome, or you believe that we're going to produce that outcome for you, and that means giving you a degree. And then the value of that degree is important. So you're going to evaluate all of these things, and if the outcome is worth the effort, you're going to put in the effort. And this can be used in your personal life, this can be used in work. Wherever you engage in behaviors, you can use this. And really it just says that you're always evaluating. You're evaluating the cost versus the benefit and the value of the benefit once you obtain it. And here's just in figure 5.5 the expectancy model where you have effort, and then you have the environment, performance, and ability. Those things will affect your ability to and perceived ability to obtain that goal. And then you have the outcome and the value that you place on that outcome. The Porter-Lawler model, it focuses on satisfaction and performance. And really, it's a knockoff of what we just saw with Vroom. If rewards are adequate, high levels of performance may lead to satisfaction. And satisfaction is determined by the perceived equity of intrinsic, which is intangible, and extrinsic, which is tangible, or tangible rewards for performance. So intrinsic is knowing that you've done a good job and you do it for the sake of doing a good job. Extrinsic are those rewards that you get, such as pay, benefits, and so forth, recognition maybe, that motivate you to go out and do more with that organization. Now, the guidelines for using expectancy theory: you need to determine the primary outcome each employee wants, decide what levels or kinds of performance are needed to meet those goals, make sure the desired levels of performance are possible, and link the desired outcomes and desired performance. Now, to give you an example, I had a student who worked for UPS, and he was a driver. He had come to know several drivers at UPS, and they had their little group of friends, and when they got off work, they would go and play bowling and just get together, and they were kind of like a tight-knit group of brothers. And the opportunity for promotion came up. Well, this one driver had the ability, and he knew the outcome, and he placed value on that outcome. So he took the steps necessary to become a supervisor over the drivers. But as it turns out, once he became supervisor, his relationship changed with the drivers. They were more distant than they were while he was a driver. And within 3 months, he had demanded that you either make me a driver again or I'm quitting. It wasn't enough. He didn't value that job and that raise enough to forfeit his friendship with his fellow drivers. So that's an example of placing valence or value on the expected outcome. Now, they may offer you a raise where you work, and it may be a $10 an hour raise and a promotion. But if you're going to have to sacrifice your weekends and more hours at work, you may not place as much value on that position. So you would deny it or you would refuse it. Also, if a lot of people want a PhD, for instance, but they don't have in their mind the ability to do that. I'm not a good writer. I am not able to put in the hours. So their ability to be able to perform to the level of obtaining a PhD may stop them. So within the expectancy theory, you are constantly evaluating all of these variables that will determine if you engage in this behavior or not. Now, you analyze a situation for conflicting expectancies. If we tell you we want you to be a supervisor and then someone else says, no, we're just going to give you a raise, you need to make sure that you are aware of exactly what they're going to give you. I was hired once by a college, not this one, to go and to be the academic advisor and a professor at this college. And the dean quoted a salary, and that salary was fair. So when the day came for me to go to the main campus, I drove all the way to the main campus, which was a couple of hours away. And when I got to the HR department, we started going over salaries. And the salary that they quoted was far less than what the dean told me the school would pay. And I took issue with that. I said, no, this is not what I was told. So there were conflicting promises. And you might have worked where there's conflicting expectancies. They want you to do this or they want you to do that. So part of your responsibility is to be able to lay out exactly the job, what's expected to achieve the goals of that job or task, what the rewards are, and they need to be able to know that you're going to give the exact reward when they meet that expectation. And make sure the rewards are large enough. There's a theory called tournament theory. And tournament theory suggests that small little rewards may not entice or motivate a person to perform any better. Like if I went and did all that work for UPS and all they gave me was a $2 an hour raise, but increased my responsibility and I would have to forget my friends, then that's not going to be large enough. If they put me in an executive track and I'm making $75,000, a company car, and I'm on the road towards bigger and better things, that would get my attention. And some people may say, forget, I can find other friends, or I can buy a dog or do something to pass the time away. But the reward needs to be large enough for them to be able to engage in it, to give that reward value. And make sure the overall system is equitable for everyone, and that goes back to equity theory. Whatever you offer, you have to make it equal for everybody, and that's called distributive justice. And that's a very important concept when it comes to lawsuits, especially today with diversity. So just use these guidelines as far as expectancy theory goes, and you should have a better motivated, or at least understand what motivates people to do what they do. Well, today we saw several models that deal with motivation and growth. We looked at Alderfer, we looked at Hertzberg, and we saw the need to be able to maintain both the fundamentals, which are hygiene factors, and also keep up motivating factors that will make people do more in that organization. Also, we looked at equity theory and how important it is. And then we finished up with expectancy theory, which is another important model. Now, that's not all. We have more to come tomorrow. So until then, you have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow.